Hi, my name is Brooke Finister, and my mom's fish is just staring at me. Sup, Google? Hi, my name is Brooke Finister, and I run The Urban Sloth. I currently hold a bachelor's degree in art history and visual culture and a minor in journalism. I'm a first-generation college grad and first in my family to pursue a master's degree at Columbia University. I'm super excited to be going there this fall 2021 to study in their MOTA program, but until then, I thought I would use my platform and voice to bring more light and conversation around Black contemporary art that I find is important that we talk about. So for this month, I'll be talking about photography, and today, Gordon Parks and Dawoud Bey. Both of these artists are from the 20th century and are included in today's contemporary art focus. I wanted to start with Parks to introduce you to his practice of using photography to capture Black life through race relations, poverty, civil rights, and urban life. Self-taught, Parks won the Julius Rosenwald Fellowship in 1942 and led to a photography position in the Farm Security Administration, or FSA, in Washington, D.C. And do read more about him in the links provided below, but his story of being self-taught is why I wanted to start with him. I believe, much like Gusteau, everyone can create and explore art. He covered the complexity of Black life by building connections with his subjects, his most well-known work being Harlem Gang Leader. His work was later altered to appear darker in the magazine print issue. This photo essay about Black gang life was a look into the complexity of leadership, identity, family, and code of honor on the streets. It was taken out of context and added to the seedy narrative they wanted to paint about Black gang life in the 1940s, and Park later stuck to his pursuit to a complex Black identity in his work despite this moment of artistic license taking over his work. He wanted the legacy of his photographs and subjects to be celebrated and examined as unique moments and experiences led by complex people. Black Harlem police officers in the 1940s, the Tuskegee Airmen in 1943, Duke Ellington, Muhammad Ali, and Black Muslims. There was no one Black life, and the only way to understand this was to capture it and engage with it beyond the lens. Parks was adamant about what I call ethical photography, to learn your subject and show them in the light that is most themselves through the photographer's perspective. Parks' work is incredibly impactful as it is the predecessor to a lot of street photography I see being done due to Black Lives Matter protests and social engagement. This brings me to Dawoud Bey. The MoMA has an excerpt text online from the museum publication by Darby English, among others, Blackness at MoMA. Dawoud Bey wrote the following quote to set the tone of photography, starting with the Harlem Gang Leader. Since Parks' death and the excavation and preservation of his archive undertaken by the Gordon Parks Foundation is that, as often has been the case, the image of the Black subject presented here was distorted, false, and quite different in character from the photographs that Parks made during the month that he spent with Jackson. Bey's practice captures Black urban life through his memory and connection to Harlem and growing up in Queens, New York. At 16, Bey started taking photographs after seeing James Van Der Zee and other photographers at the now highly criticized exhibition Harlem on My Mind at the Met. We've now learned in art culture how to showcase culture and art better simultaneously, but the language, technique, and advocacy needed to be developed and pushed for before we could have the retrospectives and mass scale of Black work on show as we do in 2021. Bey had his first solo exhibition at the Studio Museum in Harlem in 1979. As a result of the Great Migration, Black people inhabited more densely populated urban areas and communities like Brooklyn, and they were becoming hubs of fashion, life, and culture. I loved his street portrait series, making portraits in the Brooklyn neighborhood where he lived in 1988. As a part of ethical public photography, he even shared the instant prints from his Polaroid-type PN film and kept negatives for his printing. I love it being described as a chance for the subject to direct their gaze and allowing for a momentarily sustained and empowering relationship. This quote, "I saw that the camera could be a weapon against poverty, against racism, against all sorts of social wrongs. I knew at that point I had to have a camera by Gordon Parks is one of my favorite things said by him. Parks' work is extremely impactful to really set a precedent for a lot of street photographers today and in the past. And now with the Black Lives Matter protests, you see a lot more photographers really focusing on the connection between the subject and their occasion. Why are these people protesting? What are their expressions on their face? What kind of chants are going along with it? A picture is worth 1,000 words, but when it's really celebrating the narrative, the background, and ethically sharing the voice of the subject, it really does change the whole tone. And Dawoud Bey is another perfect example of that, and that's why I'm talking about him today too. My first encounter with Bey's work was sitting in the SF MoMA, and I believe he was on one of the first few floors off of the main lobby, and I sat in the gallery for about an hour just sitting with the work and really feeling a connection to them, as they could have easily been my aunt or my uncle, and that kind of personal connection is what really makes Black work so impactful. Being able to see yourself in these museum spaces, these artistic spaces, is very special. And museums do a lot in order to encourage that by offering public programs or membership levels or free admission for students or kids 18 and under. But it also comes down to really showing certain kind of work that connects to a community or is accessible to all age levels, something that can be easily interpreted and kind of really meditated on. And you use kind of techniques like VTS or visual thinking strategies in order to connect with artwork, but it really comes down to having Black artists, the Black subject, and also having the narrative really taking up the space and taking time to really meditate and reflect on what it means to be a Black American in America. And that tone does change over time. A piece of work in the 1970s might be completely interpreted differently in 2021. And that's why we talk about Black contemporary art. Hi, my name is Brooke Finister and I run The Urban Sloth. And I'm transitioning over to YouTube in order to bring my love of art and culture, and specifically Black contemporary art, to a wider audience. I saw it as a need that needed to be filled because most of my textbooks didn't talk a lot about Black artists, and if they did, it might have been a paragraph or maybe a page, while a whole chapter would be dedicated to their white counterparts. And that's not to say that art is inherently racist or is leaving out a large portion of the narrative. It's just simply not being written about or talked about. So as I venture into doing that, I'll be bringing you Gordon Parks and Dawoud Bey as part of today's episode and this month's focus in photography, specifically Black photography.